Hello and welcome back to a Symphony of Psalms, a podcast produced by Powell United Methodist Church. I am Rachel Parfenchuk, Director of Music Ministries.
And I'm Kim LaRue, Director of Adult Ministries, again here at Powell United Methodist Church. And we're back again to talk about Stravinsky's Symphony of Psalms. And Rachel's going to remind us of what we just did last time so that we can connect it to this time.
Yeah, so we talked about Movement 1 last time, and this idea of there being some sort of question, or like we're asking, waiting, hoping. Kim talked about this statement of confession, and it kind of left us without an answer. And now here we are in Movement 2, and we have our answer. This piece they use the text from Psalm 40, verses 1, 2, and 3. And Kim, do you want to go ahead and read that text?
Yep. With expectation I have waited for the Lord, and he was attentive to me. And he heard my prayers, and he brought me out of the pit of misery and the mire of dregs. And he set my feet upon a rock and directed my steps. And he put a new canticle into my mouth, a song to our God. Many shall see and shall fear, and they shall hope in the Lord. I love this text because I've always talked about when I'm struggling with something, I always talk about being in the muck and the mire of it, right? This like kind of slogging through a creek, and you can't even get your feet up out of it. And that's what this reminds me of. This person has waited, slogging through the muck and the mire. The pit in these old texts is like the worst place you could be. I mean, we would probably say the same thing, but that's definitely a place where they felt very far away from God, being in the pit. And so you can imagine being lifted up, and they talk about in the psalm here being set upon a rock, right? And directed my steps. So when you were confused, when you didn't know what to do, when you felt like you were slogging along and not moving anywhere, God lifts you up out of all of that and places you on this, what I would call firm ground. Not to mention the connection between God is our rock, or Jesus is the rock of our salvation, right? And then the other thing that we talked about last time, and Rachel just mentioned it, is when we in worship, when we have a prayer of confession, which is what Movement 1 sounded like to me, Movement 2 is the words of assurance, right? It's the recognition that God is with me. It's the recognition of God's grace and mercy. God is willing to pull me up out of whatever gunk I'm in, whether I caused it myself or whether someone else, was wounding me somehow. That doesn't matter. God lifts us up out of all of that and shows us a new path. And that's what this text does. And Stravinsky pulls this out of Psalm 40 as a kind of a counterbalance to what we had in Movement 1.
Yep, exactly. So the connection between Movement 1 and Movement 2 it's everywhere. Musically speaking, this second movement is the form that is kind of the basis of this movement is what we would call a double fugue. We're not going to go into too much detail on what a double fugue is, other than there is a very specific formula that composers use to compose these fugues. So it starts with a theme, a presentation of a theme, and then that theme gets transposed into a different, and then you have all of these different voices working together, these different themes weaving in and out of each other, and it's quite beautiful. And the origin of this actual structure is all the way back into our early music, our Baroque music. So it's interesting to see, this neoclassical composition kind of revisiting the history, this older style of music, the fugue. So we've got the fugue that is also based off of the 4-note cell that was our ostinato in the first movement.
Love it.
So there's this musical connection on top of the themes that we get through the text as well.
I love this idea also that Stravinsky goes all the way back to Baroque to pick up that form of music, which of course isn't uncommon. We often borrow from other periods of time, but what I love about it in this place is that we talk about the God of history, the God of creation, the God that is and was and will be, right? And so again, it's just another metaphor musically of the fact that God is constant, God is always there, God is present and always attentive. I love this translation. With expectation, I have waited for the Lord, and he was attentive to me, right? Not just he kind of listened, but he was, attentive means paying attention and really empathizing with whatever I was going through. And God got it, as we would say, right? God gets me. And that doesn't mean I'm perfect. It just means that I'm loved and that I am cherished by God, and God wants the best for me. That's why God shows me the new path. I love that.
Yeah. And I actually have got a really interesting quote here by Stravinsky about the second movement, if you don't mind.
Sure.
I think I'd like to read it.
Of course.
It says, so Stravinsky's account of this second movement is, the Waiting for the Lord psalm makes the most overt use of musical symbolism in any of my music before the flood. An upside-down pyramid of fugues, it begins with a purely instrumental fugue of limited compass and employs only solo instruments. The next and higher stage of the upside-down pyramid is the human fugue, which does not begin without instrumental help for the reason that I modified the structure as I composed and decided to overlap instruments and voices to give the music material more development. But the human choir is heard a cappella after that. The human fugue also represents a higher level in the architectural symbolism by the fact that it expands into the bass register. The third stage, the upside-down foundation, unites the two fugues.
Love it. Love it. Yeah. Just fascinating how complex and beautiful. We were listening to this a little while ago, I kept thinking, how do they come up with these ideas? And musical ideas, and how do they know what instrument? It's just beautiful. I hope you all enjoy listening to it. Even if it's not your favorite style of music, it's fascinating to listen to and just imagine what the composer went through as they were composing it.
Yeah, and that's a good point. Just to mention, I'm sure as you've listened to this piece of music, you've noticed that harmonically, tonally, it sounds a little bit different than a lot of music that we're used to hearing in church or in other settings. And it's a different time period, it's a different composer, and to hear the words of the Bible being set to music, all different styles of music, it's so interesting to see how the different styles can bring something unique and different and really comment on the words in a different way.
Love that. All right, anything else you want to offer us for this second movement?
I think that's all I've got.
All right, well, I'm Kim LaRue. We're glad you were with us.
And I'm Rachel Parfinchuk, and we can't wait to see you next time.
All right, sounds good. We'll see you